So, morning, David. Welcome to this 1st of March CloudTrade TV podcast. Second one that you and I have done in the series, and it's been a lovely weekend. I don't know what the weather was like with you down in your part of the world, but we had beautiful blue skies and sunshine. It was quite warm over the weekend, running into the beginning of March. So hopefully a good start to spring.
Oh, but yeah, that's right, Steve. We took my little dog for a walk. He's only 6 months, good pandemic pup, and he's got kennel cough this morning, so he's in isolation.
Oh no!
I don't know if it's linked in any way to COVID, but
hopefully not.
a dry cough in his throat, so he's either got COVID or kennel cough.
Oh dear. Well, I wish him well, and I know that you and I both had our first round of vaccines, so we're slowly but surely building our immunity, we hope. So listen, it's as always lovely to talk to you this morning, and part of this series is to look at challenges that we've come across in the industry with our customers over the many years that we've been working together in the area of digitization and business process automation. And one of the areas I wanted to focus on today was on what I call trusted data. We're all aware of big data, aren't we? That's been around for a long time, but the businesses today have many challenges around, I suppose, the constant change in IT. And when you look at document processing, we focus on invoices and orders as one of the couple of areas that businesses come to CloudTrade for assistance with. And they've got the challenge of, do I do it on premise? Do I outsource this? The market is constantly changing. But one of the things that we recognize all the time is documents come through in different formats, different shapes and sizes, and with different content. So there isn't a constant there. As I mentioned earlier, IT constantly changes. And one of the challenges that I often hear from executives in businesses is they just want data they can trust. Data that they know when they process it within their business is going to meet their business demands. As I mentioned before, CFOs can outsource, but at the end of the day, they can't outsource their responsibility. They have to put the returns into tax authorities, to their shareholders and so on. So having the ability to receive business documents, human readable documents, and process them with accuracy is critically important. And that's where I come to my trusted data question. So one of the things that I wanted to debate with you this morning is, why do capture solutions, because at the end of the day, they've been around a long time and there's some very good solutions out there. Why do you think they find it so hard to capture data in a way that a CFO can actually sit back and go, I can trust that data?
Yeah, I think Steve, the answer to this is in two parts. I think one of the problems is, and you're right, there are a lot of solutions out there, but an awful lot of them are quite legacy. One of the problems is the way they just do the capture, which is really kind of, right at the root of this. They usually use OCR, most of them still, where it's completely unnecessary now in a data-rich document, and that by definition introduces errors. Even the very, very best OCR, and some of the modern OCRs are really good on anything but pristine document, they make errors, and they generally also use a generic searching techniques, and at best this gets 80 or 90%. By the combine those two together, you get 80-90% of the fields they pick up off invoices correct, but 80 or 90% of fields, you have 10 fields on a document at its most simplest document, one of them's wrong. So you're almost in the situation of building in the fact that one document is going to be wrong somewhere. Every document is going to have an error on it or thereabouts.
And I suppose that's interesting, David. I suppose that brings the challenge of, what does that mean to a business then if you've got inaccurate data? The fact that you can't trust it as a CFO in a business, I guess you're going to have to employ people downstream to check that data is accurate, because you're not going to publish false information. But just explore, if you would, some of the challenges that having inaccurate data means to a business.
Well, at best, and this is real at best, something downstream captures the inaccuracy and you've got to have somebody to correct it. That's the best thing. That's the best thing that can happen.
Right.
The worst is, or much worse than that, is corrupts some downstream business process. That could be something as straightforward to understand as you just pay an invalid invoice. Not great. You pay the supplier, you'll pay one of your suppliers the wrong amount. But it could even be worse. It could be, I think you mentioned early on, Steve, Sarbanes-Oxley and regulatory approval, that actually you're reporting invalid data. Your numbers are wrong. Your business numbers are wrong. So, invalid data, what we call at CloudTrade false positives, is really, really, really a bad news.
And I suppose when you think about all the press that we've had in the last probably couple of years around robotic process automation, if you have data that you present to a robot that is fundamentally flawed, I suppose you've got a dumb robot in that regard. The robot it can't process information correctly if it's presented with inaccurate data.
Well, it can always input incorrect data into the screens, and most robots are still just screen scraping and picking and entering stuff into screens. An invalid amount is an invalid amount if it's input by a robot or by a person. It's still the wrong number, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely interesting. And I suppose the other challenge, we've got the capture of data and the accuracy levels we've just been debating, but actually, in the real world, do documents coming in always contain the right information, or in fact the information that's necessary to process the data downstream?
Well, no, they don't. And I was going to say actually early on, Steve, you moved on a bit, that the capture is the problem of solutions, but it isn't just about the capture. This is the point. It's about making sure the data is right for the end system. No invoice that I know of or have hardly ever seen has the receiving party's vendor ID on it. So, by definition, if you're going to automatically process invoices, you have to add the vendor reference. That's a very simple end of the solution, and it's simple example. But with sales orders, for example, customers, if you've got inbound sales orders, it's very, very likely that your customer sees or describes what they're buying in a different way to what your fulfillment, from the description you've got in your fulfillment system. And there has to be a mapping between what your customer thinks they're buying and what you are actually selling. And without doing that by hand, the way that is what you need to do for automation, because your fulfillment system is not going to understand your customer's description of their goods.
Yeah, interesting. I suppose, if you think about it in a human process way, you or I would receive, in the old days, we'd open an envelope, we'd have contents, we'd look at, the piece of paper that we're reading, and we'd say, this is a customer order, as an example, take your analogy. And we know the customer, we know what they normally order from us, don't we? And therefore you apply some logic. So coming back to the question about how do I get trusted data and the different shapes and formats that data arrives in businesses today, and majority of it being electronic, but what is the answer then, taking what people know in the business about this is what I should do with this document and the way that data is delivered to us today? Is there an answer that we can go back to a CFO and go, actually, this will give you trusted data so that you don't have to touch it? It will deliver to your back end ERP system, what we call in our world first time post rates. You will deliver accurate data. What is there an answer?
Yes, and that is what we do at CloudTrade. It's about using the correct tools for the job. As I always say, make everybody laugh at CloudTrade. Hammers are great for banging in nails, but they're not so good for putting in screws.
Yeah.
And so don't use a hammer to put in screws. RPA is about repeatable, simple processes. It's not about coping with the variability you get on human readable documents like invoices and purchase orders. You're applying the wrong tool. Great tools as RPA are, you're applying the wrong tool to do the job. What we built at CloudTrade is a tool that's built on a mix of AI, both natural language processing and machine learning neural networks, but also with the ability to program in bespoke business rules. And it is that combination of what the machine can learn and the simple parts, plus what actually you need human knowledge captured in the form of business rules which gives you a solution where you can get that 100% data. That's what we're about.
It is, absolutely. So, David, that's really interesting. Using that rules-based approach, the human-assisted front end, as it were, then to provide end-to-end automation. That is something that we're very proud of in CloudTrade, and we've been delivering now successfully to our clients for the last 10 years. So, interesting debate. Hopefully for our listeners today, there's some information that will be useful for them in their challenges around addressing their own business processing. But we'd be delighted to hear from anybody that has challenges or indeed requires to have data they can trust in their end-to-end business processes. So thank you again for your time this morning, David, and looking forward to the next podcast we have next week.
Yeah,
many thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I'm off now to see the dog. He's in isolation at the moment.
Good luck. Thanks again, David.
Talk to you later.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye bye.